The morning began like every other in the Kensington mansion. Sunlight washing across marble floors, the faint hum of a distant coffee machine, and the steady rhythm of a life that looked perfect from the outside. Richard Kensington, a man whose name graced business magazines and charity boards, believed that success could shield his family from pain. Yet behind those elegant walls, small cracks had begun to form, invisible to everyone including him. He buttoned his crisp blue shirt, rehearsing the speech he would give at his company's new product launch, when a faint, trembling sound cut through the calm. It was high-pitched, scared, and heartbreakingly familiar. "Mommy, please, don't." The briefcase slipped from his hand. For a second he didn't breathe. Then he was running, the echo of his shoes slamming against the wooden hallway. He reached the kitchen door and froze. What he saw wasn't violence. It was desperation. 6-year-old Lily crouched on the floor clutching baby Emma in her arms, milk spreading across the tiles from a fallen bottle. Across the room, Sarah, his wife, still in her red house dress, stood shaking, eyes wide, one hand covering her mouth. The look on her face wasn't anger, it was panic. Her whole body seemed to sag under an invisible weight. Richard rushed forward, voice cracking. "Sarah, what happened?" She blinked as if waking from a dream. "The bottle slipped," she whispered. "I was just trying." And they started crying. "I couldn't." She sank to her knees, hands trembling. The truth hit Richard in a wave. This wasn't cruelty. It was exhaustion. Months of sleepless nights, the pressure of a new baby, the endless days while he was away building empires. He had been chasing millions while the person he loved most was quietly falling apart. He crouched beside her, gently taking the bottle from her hand, setting it aside. "Hey," he said softly, "it's all right. No one's angry." Lily's sobs softened. The baby whimpered once and quieted. Richard lifted Lily onto his lap, stroking her hair. "You're safe," he whispered. "Mommy just got scared." Sometimes grown-ups get scared too. The sunlight streaming through the window touched Sarah's face, revealing dark circles under her eyes. "I'm failing them," she murmured. "I can't even feed the baby without panicking." Richard shook his head. "No," he said. "You're just tired. You've been doing this alone while I've been pretending work is the only thing that matters." His words broke the heavy silence. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in weeks. "You noticed," she said quietly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I thought you'd stopped seeing me." He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I see you now," he said. The air seemed to shift. The polished surfaces, the shining counters, all the things that once symbolized perfection, felt irrelevant compared to the fragile heartbeat of the family before him. Richard helped Sarah to her feet, cleaned the spill, and led her to the couch. He handed Lily a napkin to dry her face. "Accidents happen, sweetheart," he told her. "Even to adults. What matters is we help each other." Lily nodded, her small fingers gripping the napkin as if it were a promise. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Sarah broke the silence. "Richard, I don't know how to fix this." He took a slow breath. "We start by talking, by resting, maybe by asking for help." She frowned. "You mean therapy?" He nodded. "Yes, we built our business with advisors. Why should our hearts be any different?" A faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "You'd actually come with me? Every session," he said. "I owe you that." Later, when the children were napping, Richard stood at the window, looking out over the garden where sunlight danced on the grass. The sound of Lily's earlier cry still echoed in his mind, not as a wound but as a wake-up call. That small voice had torn down the illusion of perfection and shown him what truly mattered. He pulled out his phone, opened his calendar filled with meetings, and began deleting them one by one. A new priority replaced every canceled event: family time. When evening came, Sarah joined him on the patio. The golden light of sunset softened everything, even their pain. "You really canceled your meetings?" she asked. He nodded. "All of them. Money can wait. You and the kids can't." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I was scared you'd be angry." "I'm not," he said. "I'm grateful. Today could have gone wrong, but it reminded me who I want to be." Inside, Lily stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about butterflies and sunshine. Sarah smiled faintly. "She forget the crying by morning," she said, "but I won't forget what caused it." Richard kissed her forehead. "Good," he whispered. Because neither will I. As the stars began to appear, the house that had felt so cold in the morning now hummed with quiet warmth. They would need patience, therapy, and forgiveness. But for the first time in a long while, there was hope. Richard looked at his wife's tired yet peaceful face and thought, this is what being rich truly means, having the chance to start over. The next morning, the world outside seemed calmer, but inside the Kensington house, the silence still carried the echo of yesterday's cry. Sunlight streamed through the tall kitchen windows, lighting up the place where milk had spilled the day before. It was clean now, every trace of the chaos gone, but the memory lingered in the air, like a quiet promise that things would never go back to being quite the same. Richard sat at the breakfast table in his casual shirt, a sight so rare that even Lily had paused mid-bite to look at him. "Daddy, aren't you going to work?" she asked, her voice small but curious. He smiled gently and shook his head. "Not today, sweetheart. Today I'm working on us." The words hung in the air for a moment, soft but powerful. Sarah glanced at him from across the table, her hair tied loosely, a faint hint of uncertainty still shadowing her tired eyes. She didn't speak, but the gratitude in her gaze said enough. After breakfast, Richard called a family meeting, a thing they hadn't done in years. The four of them sat in the living room, Lily with her doll, baby Emma cooing in her cradle, Sarah clutching a cup of tea like it was a lifeline, and Richard sitting close, his tone calm and steady. "Yesterday scared me," he began, his voice heavy but kind. "Not because of what happened, but because it showed me how far I've drifted from this family. I've been chasing success, thinking it would protect us, but it only built walls between us." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't from exhaustion, they were from recognition. "You're here now," she said softly. He nodded. "And I'm staying. I've already found a family therapist. We'll go together. No shame, no blame, just honesty." The following week, they walked into a cozy office painted in warm colors, the kind of place that smelled faintly of lavender and peace. Dr. Morgan, a calm woman in her 50s with kind eyes, welcomed them with a smile that felt genuine. She spoke gently, guiding them through the first session like a navigator leading them through fog. "You're not broken," she said. "You're just tired of pretending to be perfect." Sarah broke down first, her words tumbling out like a flood. She could no longer contain her loneliness, her fear of being a bad mother, her resentment at Richard's absences. Richard listened, really listened, for the first time in years. Every word was a mirror reflecting what his ambition had cost them. When his turn came, his voice cracked. "I thought money could fix everything, but it just made me feel safe while everyone else was drowning." In the weeks that followed, therapy became their anchor. Every session peeled back another layer of silence. Sometimes it was painful, sometimes healing, but always real. Sarah started to laugh again, small laughs at first, uncertain, but soon genuine. Lily noticed the difference before anyone else did. One afternoon, as Sarah hummed softly while feeding Emma, Lily whispered, "Mommy, you sound happy again." Sarah froze for a second, then smiled and kissed her daughter's head. "I think I am, baby." Meanwhile, Richard found himself rediscovering fatherhood. He learned how to change Emma's diapers, read bedtime stories, and even burn pancakes on Sunday mornings just to make his girls giggle. The mansion that had once felt like a museum now echoed with laughter and warmth. Still, healing was not a straight line. There were nights when Sarah would wake up shaking, haunted by the memory of her own anger, and Richard would hold her until dawn, whispering, "We're okay now. We're learning." Then, one evening, a letter arrived that threatened to undo everything. It was from the company board, urgent and demanding. They wanted Richard back. A major deal was collapsing. Investors were panicking, and only he could save it. For a moment, the old instincts kicked in, the temptation to dive back into the world of control. Deadlines and applause was strong. Sarah saw the letter and said quietly, "They'll always need you, Richard, but we need you more." Her words struck deep. He looked around the living room, Lily drawing at the table, baby Emma asleep, Sarah watching him with quiet strength, and realized that no amount of wealth could compare to this peace. He picked up his phone, typed a single message to his assistant, "Tell them to handle it. My family comes first." Then he turned it off. That night, something shifted between them again. It was as if Sarah's walls finally fell. She leaned against him and whispered, "I didn't think you'd actually stay." "I didn't either," he admitted softly. "But now that I am, I'm never leaving again." The next therapy session was different. Dr. Morgan smiled as she watched them sit closer together than ever before. "You've both done hard work," she said, "but healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means forgiving yourself enough to keep growing." Sarah nodded. "Some days I still feel like I'm walking on glass," she confessed. "But at least now, Richard's holding my hand." The doctor smiled. "That's what families do, they walk through the glass together." In the following months, small miracles began to unfold. Lily, once so shy, started painting again. Sarah began volunteering at a local mothers group, helping other women who felt lost in the chaos of parenthood. Richard quietly funded the group but never mentioned it. He wanted Sarah to feel it was hers. Their home filled with photos, again real, imperfect, beautiful photos full of laughter, spills, and messy hair. Then came the moment that defined their new beginning. It was Lily's 7th birthday. Balloons filled the living room, and laughter rang from every corner. As she blew out the candles, she looked up at her parents and said innocently, "I made a wish." "What did you wish for?" Sarah asked, smiling. Lily grinned. "That you and Daddy never stop smiling." The room went silent, and for a second, tears glimmered in Sarah's eyes. Richard leaned down and kissed his daughter's forehead. "That's the one wish I plan to make come true." Later that night, when the children were asleep, Sarah stood by the window, watching the stars. "Do you ever think we can really forget what happened?" she asked softly. Richard joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Forget? No," he said. "But we can turn it into something better, a reminder that love's worth fighting for." She smiled faintly. "You sound like one of your old speeches." "Maybe," he said. "But this time, I mean every word." Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and the world seemed peaceful again. Inside, two people who had once been strangers in the same house now stood side by side, stronger than before. Their wealth no longer lived in bank accounts or luxury cars. It lived in moments like this, in quiet nights and warm embraces, in the soft sound of their daughter breathing in the next room. And as the clock struck midnight, Sarah turned to him and said, "I think we're finally home." Richard smiled, holding her close. "We've always been home," he whispered. "We just forgot how to live in it." Months passed, and the Kensington home had changed in ways no one could have imagined. The mansion, once echoing with silence, was now alive with laughter, late-night talks, and the sound of a family learning how to breathe together again. Richard had stepped back from corporate life, turning his empire over to trusted hands. Sarah, once fragile and uncertain, had blossomed into a woman with purpose, leading a small group that helped struggling mothers rebuild their confidence. Every Sunday, their home filled with warmth, pancakes in the morning, soft music in the background, and sunlight falling like a blessing through the windows. But even the calmest seas hide currents beneath the surface, and the storm that came next was one they never saw coming. It began on an ordinary Thursday morning. Sarah had just returned from a community meeting, her eyes bright with excitement. "They want to expand the program," she told Richard, setting her bag down on the counter. "They're asking me to oversee the new outreach center downtown." Richard smiled, genuinely proud. "That's amazing. Sarah, you've worked hard for this." But a flicker of unease stirred in his chest. The downtown project meant longer hours, late evenings, and time apart again, the very thing they had just healed from. He swallowed the thought and hugged her, pretending not to notice the echo of fear creeping back into his heart. Over the next few weeks, the rhythm of their life began to shift. Sarah's mornings turned into rushed exits, her nights into quiet returns. She'd kiss the children goodnight long after they were asleep, whispering apologies into their hair. Richard tried to stay supportive, but the mansion began to feel emptier, its walls stretching wider with each passing evening. Lily, now 7, noticed first. "Daddy, is Mommy going away again?" she asked one night as he tucked her in. Richard hesitated. "No, sweetheart. Mommy's just helping other people right now. She'll be home soon." But deep down, he wondered if history was repeating itself. Then came the fundraiser gala, a glittering event Sarah had organized for her foundation. The hall was filled with laughter, music, and clinking glasses. But beneath the sparkle, Richard felt the familiar ache of distance. Sarah stood across the room, radiant and confident, surrounded by admirers and supporters. He realized she was becoming someone new, someone the world finally saw, but he worried that he might lose her again in the process. When she finally found him, she looked tired but happy. "I can't believe this is real," she said. "A year ago, I was falling apart, and now look at this." He smiled, masking the doubt in his eyes. "You deserve it all." But when she turned away to greet another guest, a quiet voice in his mind whispered, "So why does it feel like you're disappearing again?" Back home that night, Sarah sat beside him in bed, scrolling through emails and messages. "They're asking me to give a talk next month," she said absently. "It's an honor, but it means traveling for 3 days." Richard didn't answer at first. He stared at the ceiling, remembering all those nights she had once spent crying in the dark, begging for connection. Now she had found her light, and it was leading her away. Finally, he said softly, "I'm proud of you. Just don't forget what brought us back together." Sarah paused, sensing the strain behind his words. "You think I'm forgetting us?" he sighed. "No, I'm afraid I might not be enough for the version of you that's learning to fly." Her eyes softened. She turned off her phone and took his hand. "You were the one who taught me how. Don't fear the wings, you helped me grow." But life, as always, had its own timing. A few days later, Richard received a call from his company, the one he had left behind. Their new CEO had made a disastrous decision, and the company's reputation was on the line. They needed Richard to return, even for a short while. The timing couldn't have been worse. Sarah was preparing for her conference trip, and the children needed both of them home. He stood at a crossroads: stay true to his promise of family first, or return to the empire he built from scratch. That night, as Sarah packed her suitcase, Richard sat in silence by the window. The memories of old mistakes pressed heavily on his mind. Finally, he whispered, "They need me back for a while." Sarah froze, her hands still on the zipper of her bag. "You're going back." Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed the storm inside. "Just for a few weeks," he said quickly, "to stabilize things. I'll fly home every weekend." She closed her suitcase slowly. "I guess we both have somewhere we need to be." And so, just like that, the family drifted apart again, only this time it wasn't anger that divided them, but ambition. They were both chasing something they believed in, yet both feared losing what mattered most. Days turned into weeks. Phone calls became shorter. Missed dinners piled up. Lily grew quieter, her bright laughter fading into questions no one had time to answer. "When is Mommy coming home?" she asked one night, her little voice trembling. Richard forced a smile. "Soon, baby. Mommy's doing something very important." But when he turned away, his eyes glistened with unshed tears. Then one evening, everything changed. Sarah was on her way home from her conference when her car broke down. Miles from the city, rain poured in sheets, the road empty and dark. She sat in the driver's seat, exhaustion washing over her, and for the first time in months, she cried not from stress, but from longing. She pulled out her phone and called home. When Richard answered, she whispered through tears, "I miss you." He froze, his heart catching in his throat. "Sarah, where are you?" "On the highway," she said softly. "And I just realized I've been so busy proving I'm strong that I forgot how much I need you." Without hesitation, Richard grabbed his keys and drove through the night, rain blurring the world outside. When he finally reached her, headlights illuminated her figure standing by the roadside, drenched and shivering. He ran to her, wrapping her in his coat, holding her as though he'd never let go again. "You shouldn't have had to come," she whispered, tears mixing with rain. "I should have never left without you," he replied. In that moment, it didn't matter who had been right or wrong. The only truth that mattered was that real love was never about perfection. It was about showing up, again and again, no matter how many storms you had to drive through. Later that night, back home, they sat by the fireplace, both wrapped in blankets, both silent, but connected in a way words could never capture. Sarah looked at him and said, "We almost lost it again, didn't we?" He nodded slowly, "Almost, but not this time." She smiled faintly. "Then let's stop trying to be perfect. Let's just be us." And for the first time in a long while, Richard laughed deep, unguarded, real. As dawn broke, the golden light poured through the windows, touching their faces with warmth. Upstairs, Lily stirred in her bed and smiled in her sleep, sensing somehow that her world was whole again. Downstairs, two people who had once been strangers in their own home sat hand in hand, watching the sunrise, knowing that the road ahead would still have storms. But now they had learned how to weather them together. The months that followed were unlike any the Kensington family had ever lived through. For the first time in years, their days were not ruled by clocks or calendars. Life slowed down, intentionally, beautifully. Richard had turned down every major corp,